Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
We want to talk a little bit about those Qualcomm earnings and also the results that we got from ARM Holding. Let's get to it with Jackie Davalos. She follows the tech sector for us here at Bloomberg, and she joins us now. So, Jackie, let's start with Qualcomm, because we definitely did see a big bump up in the aftermarket trade. Tell us about the results and what stands out for you.
Well, there's a few things here that investors were looking for, and the first really starts off with the forecast. The company said it's going to be bringing in somewhere between 10.5 billion to about 11.3 billion. That beat estimates, which was coming in at the lower end of 10.5 billion. So that was a solid beat. Profit also is expected to come in at around $3 and a nickel per share, also beating expectations by a good margin. But overall, these higher level results represent kind of a recovery in this very important part of the business for the company, which is its smartphone sector. China in particular has been kind of a question mark. You know, you've seen this slump in the smartphone market broadly, but Qualcomm said that China's sales of some of its Android-based phones actually increased about 40%, which is a really bullish sign for the company. Of course, Qualcomm gets 60% of its revenue from the smartphone business. So overall, this is a good sign that it is kind of overcoming the broader challenges in that market.
Can we look at Apple as look at this as a bellwether for Apple? I mean, look, we already heard from Apple, but this is a company, right, that gets 27%, Jackie, of its revenue from Apple, 21% from Samsung, and then it goes down to Xiaomi at 5.5%. So does it give us any insight into how Apple's doing?
You know, it could offer some signs there because, you know, if anyone's going to feel it first, it is a company like Qualcomm. So, of course, we can kind of gather perhaps an early sign there that perhaps that market is seeing a little bit of a recovery. We'll just have to kind of wait and see for Apple's results. In the meantime, just kind of knowing how this kind of at this part of the supply chain, what the recovery is looking like, 40% increase. That's not nothing. It's fairly substantial. So I think, you know, for other businesses that depend on smartphones, kind of moving over to ARM, for example, you know, who is also incredibly dependent on that. But their story is a little bit different in that the bar was a lot higher because of this AI expectation. Now, a lot could be kind of deduced that maybe investors are just kind of thinking this is a little bit, you know, it's run its course because its revenue numbers came in, you know, at 844 million. That beat expectations for this quarter at 810 million. Beat there. Its revenue forecast was the midpoint was a little bit lower than what investors had been forecasting. But again, I think this is more of the AI story and the disappointment there.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I'm just curious as we watch these stocks in the aftermarket, and certainly we'll probably maybe, you know, touch on them tomorrow as well. Is there, let's go to Qualcomm first. Is there a number one question that's top of mind that you think analysts need to be asking on the call?
I think they will want to know how lasting this China recovery is looking. They maintained their guidance for the year. I think for the next couple quarters, there's a lot that can change. Clearly, that market is the most vulnerable out of its entire portfolio. So I think the longevity of that recovery is something they'll be asking about.
What about ARM? Looking at shares of ARM in the after hours right now, bouncing around, but down about 3% as we speak. As a reminder, second quarter revenue came in above estimates. Again, you know, this is when we're talking about a company that does chips, looking at revenue for a quarter of 844 million.
I know. It's a different scale.
It's a different scale than a company like NVIDIA, which we'll hear from later this month. Go ahead, totally. Jackie.
One sign there that is a positive, maybe they're not getting credit for, is that profit. You know, analysts were expecting around 34 cents. and they projected that in this current quarter, it's going to come in somewhere between 32 and 36. That's kind of, pretty much in line. I think the big question there is, how much are you diversifying that revenue base? How much of this is coming from AI? Is it paying off? Perhaps that bar, like I said, is a little bit higher. But any insight into, whether those profits are being generated from that line of business will be fairly key.
All right, we're going to leave it on that note. Hey, listen, Jackie, thank you so much for walking us through. Jackie Davalos with a lowdown on both Qualcomm and ARM Holdings. As we said, both of them are moving in the aftermarket.